Okay. So first thing I want to do is show you what extra resources I've got posted in the browser, content browser on Georgia View for the Odyssey, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at these. I've got a couple of films that might help you with some background, as well as some sites that connect to things that are related to ancient Greek art that could help give you some context. So, is this working yet? Yes, good. Okay, so we got a couple of PBS documentaries here, right? One is just on Greek culture generally, right? The Greeks, the crucible of civilization. There's another one that is on archaeology connected to the Trojan War. So this one's long. It's 6 parts. So if you're interested in it, please do watch it, but just note that it's going to take up a good bit of time, right? I also have a link to a podcast from BBC Radio 4, the In Our Time program, where they interview a couple of experts on Greek literature and culture about the Odyssey specifically. I have a link here to the UNESCO Heritage Site for the city we think was Troy, which is in northwestern Turkey. And also a link to the Metropolitan Museum of Art's site on Athenian vase painting, right? There are a couple of ways that we know stories from Greek myth, and not all of them are textual. Right? We have also had, there is also like that tradition of vase painting in the ancient Greek world where they depict scenes from myth. And some of the stories that we know from Greek myth, we know actually from paintings rather than from actual text. So, we could be getting it wrong. Good for us. All right, so that's that. Just know that this is here. Now, as far as what I was playing for you at the beginning of class, like if you could get past the awful New Age music, and God, how I hate New Age music, what was playing was a recitation of the beginning of the Odyssey in ancient Greek. Now, this would not have been, 100% historically accurate, right? For one thing, the ancient Greeks did not have walls of keyboards on which they could play, boring synth solos. But typically, a poem like the Odyssey would be performed in parts, say, during a party or during a dinner, by a poet strumming a small harp called a lyre, right? And it would be sung or chanted. People didn't sit down and read this, right? It was actually very much a part of popular culture and public discourse. So how many of you are already familiar with the Odyssey on some level? Okay, that's most of you, right? How many of you had to read the epic in whole or in part in high school? Okay. And honestly, how many of you actually read it? Okay. How many of you have seen, seen a movie based on it or something like that? Okay, that's even more of you, right? Okay, so what do you already know about this text? What's your level of familiarity here? What do I not need to tell you?
That he has to go on a journey?
Okay, yeah. We have, this hero, Odysseus. And Odysseus is on a journey from where to where?
From conquering Troy to home.
Yeah. He's part of the conquering Greek army at Troy, right? And so he has to get from Troy all the way sort of over here, like on the eastern Mediterranean, right? Back to his home in Ithaca, which we don't actually know where Odysseus' island of Ithaca would have been, or if it represents a real island. There's an island near Greece that we call Ithaca, but it's probably not Odysseus' Ithaca. So yeah, he starts over here, right, and he's got to somehow kind of get to, this is kind of what Greece looks like, right? Kind of fingery, and all these little islands, right? So Ithaca's somewhere over here, and this should be a relatively straightforward journey by ship, right? But it is not. For various reasons, Odysseus gets himself blown off course and finds himself wandering the greater Mediterranean region for the better part of a decade, right? So the Greek word for the kind of journey that the epic represents to us is nostos. Nostos means homecoming. What else do you already know about this epic? Or about the character of Odysseus or any other such thing? Anything at all? Anybody?
He comes home and no one recognizes him, and he has to prove himself.
Okay, yeah.
Getting his household back.
Yeah, he returns in disguise, right? And indeed, he frequently seems to travel under an assumed name or in disguise. And the name Odysseus is, we think, closely related to a Greek word let me just make sure how to spell this. Odysseustai. And Odysseustai means, it's a verb, and it means to hate. So Odysseus could translate loosely to the man who is hated, or the man who has every hand against him. And this would seem to bear out in many of his interactions with the people that he meets on this Nostos, right, this homecoming journey. What kind of hero is Odysseus? Is Odysseus the kind of hero who is really, really strong, and when something gets in his way, he just hits it till it falls down?
No.
What... If he's not like the super strong, hulkish, Gilgamesh type hero, right? Then what is he? What kind of hero is he?
Wit.
Yeah, he lives by his wits, right? He lives through cleverness. He is more intelligent, typically, than his adversaries, and uses his intelligence to get the better of them. Although sometimes we find him getting a little bit too clever by half, right? And trapping himself in his own stratagems. But the Greek word that is often used in the text to describe Odysseus is polymetis. Does anybody know what poly means in Greek? Is that a familiar prefix to you? Poly means many. Yes, good. Poly means many. And metis, I'm assuming, is unfamiliar, yes? Okay. Metis means thoughts, ideas, or strategies. So polymetis means something, many strategies or many thoughts. That's the epithet that is usually applied to Odysseus, right? When you see, references in the epic, Odysseus is great mind teeming, right? Odysseus, the man of many thoughts. That's a translation of this word polymetis. All right, so the segment of the epic that I have given to you, books 6 to 8, is not exactly the most action-packed part of it, right? This is not the most exciting portion. But thematically, in terms of certain things we'll be discussing overall in the course, and even sort of in terms of understanding Greek culture, these 3 books are actually particularly important, which is why I assigned you what is probably the dullest part of the epic to read. So sorry about that, but we kind of need to get through this. Okay, so what stood out to you in the reading thus far? Like what really struck you? What really interested you or confused you, if anything?
I guess something interesting would be Odysseus is known as the guy with many thoughts and strategies, but it's those many thoughts and strategies with the inclusion of with the inclusion of pride that led to his downfall when it comes to the Cyclops.
Well, we're not talking about the Cyclops till next time.
Oh, okay.
The Cyclops is in book 9. We're just sticking to book 6 to 8 today. So we'll talk about the Cyclops then, right? But one thing to remember as well is that, right, pride is, from a Judeo-Christian perspective, considered sinful. Many other ancient world cultures don't really view pride in quite the same kind of negative light, including the Greeks. So pride isn't necessarily an evil or a bad thing. Excessive levels of it become troublesome. But yeah, we'll talk about the Cyclops next time. We'll save that for next time. But for today's portion, right, book 6, yeah, Bradley.
Athena helps him throughout this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Can you refresh me as to why she does that? Because I can't remember which book, but she helped him.
Okay, well, who or what is Athena?
A goddess of wisdom or fear.
Yeah. She's the goddess of wisdom, and she's also a war goddess. She's the goddess of, like, strategy, planning in war. And Odysseus is one of her special favorites, right? Because what's Odysseus's great gift? Wits, right? Strategy, right? He's an expert general, a clever thinker. So that's why Athena gives him so much assistance. And is there anything weird that you notice about the assistance that she gives him? In other ancient world texts that we've looked at so far, how do gods tend to behave or to reveal themselves? Yeah, big, powerful things that speak to you directly, right? When Shamash shows up, right, he doesn't pretend he's something else, right? I am Shamash, the sun god, and this is what I say to you, Enkidu. So, shut up and listen. Even if we look at those portions of the book of Genesis, right, particularly those that belong to the Yahwist, the J strand, probably the earliest strand of the narrative, right? God is, represented as human-like and is dealing directly with people. So what's weird about Athena's behavior?
It's like a stranger. She hides her identity.
Yeah, she doesn't say who she is, and she travels in disguise, right? So the gods, in this case, disguise themselves when dealing with mortals. For whatever reason, in this epic, by and large, the gods don't reveal themselves openly. They still act in much the same way we see other ancient world deities acting, but they act undercover. Right? Athena doesn't, just show up in the middle of the Phaeacians' court and say, "Hey, my favorite mortal is about to wash up naked and filthy on your shore. Go send somebody down there to clean him up and bring him to your court, right? What does she do instead?
She convinces. Does she come to the king's daughter and convinces her to go wash the clothes at the river?
Yeah, this is all very indirect, right? She appears in a dream to the Princess Nausicaa, convinces the Princess Nausicaa that she needs to go wash the clothes. So Nausicaa goes and convinces her father to hook up the mule cart, take the clothes down to the seashore, and there they find, right, creepy, naked, middle-aged stranger, right? So let's look here at the moment when Odysseus wakes up. Turn to page 399. Can I get a volunteer to read from "But when she was about to fold the clothes"? Yeah, Seth, go for it.
As soon as I get there. 399, right?
399, yep, from around line 109.
When she was about to fold the clothes, you said? Okay.
Yep.
But when she was about to fold the clothes, yoke the mules, and head back home, the gray-eyed ones sprung her plan. Odysseus would wake up, see the lovely girl, and she would lead him to the,
Phaeacians.
Phaeacians, thank you.
Yep.
To the Phaeacian city. The princess threw the ball to one of the girls, but it sailed wide into deep swirling water. The girls screamed and Odysseus woke. Sitting up, he tried to puzzle it out. Next section, Jim.
Yep, keep going.
What kind of land have I come to now? Are the natives wild and lawless savages, or God-fearing men who welcome strangers? That sounded like girls screaming, or the cry of the spirit woman who holds the high peaks, the river wells, and the grassy meadows. Can it be I am close to human voices? I'll have a look and see for myself.
Okay, you can stop there. Thank you, Seth. So the question that he asks himself at the beginning of this little dialogue, right? What kind of land have I come to now? Are the natives wild and lawless savages, or God-fearing men who welcome strangers, right? This is actually one of the great distinctions that the epic makes, right? One of the ways Odysseus tests the people he visits for civilization is whether or not they welcome strangers, right? One of the central concepts in Greek religion was what they called Xenia. Now, how many of you have ever heard the word xenophobia before? Okay, what does it mean to be xenophobic?
You're not very keen on foreigners.
Yeah, literally it translates to fear of strangers, right? Xenia is the exact opposite of that, right? Xenia means hospitality. Right? So the expectation is when a stranger comes to you and is in your power, you are supposed to help that person within reasonable parameters, right? So when a stranger comes to visit you, you're expected to, shelter them, feed them, give them a gift, and then send them on their way, right? Again, like according to your means. So for a Greek, this is one of the big tests of whether a people are or are not civilized, right? Do they take me in, give me food, and give me a present? And that's what he's wondering here, right? People who will not show hospitality to strangers are, by Greek standards, wild and lawless savages, right? The measure of a civilization is not how rich it is, not how powerful it is, but how it treats the defenseless. Now, we will see as we read certain other texts, in particular Medea, a little bit later in the semester, that there's a lot of hypocrisy in this ideal as well. But yeah, the ideal is that people are supposed to be good to strangers. You're supposed to be kind and welcoming to strangers. And people who are not are barbarians. Or inhuman in some way, right? You know, he can't quite distinguish whether the cries he hears are just young girls screaming or are spirit women, right? Is this island full of people or is it full of monsters? He's kind of had his fill of both, right? So can I get a volunteer to read from "With that Odysseus emerged from the bushes"? Let's give somebody else a chance. Yeah.
Just checking.
You did great, but we'll give somebody else a chance.
That's cool.
And we're a shy group, huh?
I'll read.
All right. Thank you, Taylor.
With that, Odysseus emerged from the bushes. He broke off a leafy branch from the undergrowth and held it before him to cover himself. A weathered mountain lion steps into a clearing, confident in his strength, eyes glowing. The wind and rain have let up, and he's hunting cattle, sheep, or wild deer, but is hungry enough to jump the stone walls of the animal pens. So Odysseus advanced upon these ringleted girls.
Ringleted.
Yeah, ringleted girls, naked as he was. What choice did he have? He was a frightening sight, disfigured with brine, and the girls fluttered off to the jutting beaches. Other Alcinous daughters stayed. Athena put courage in her heart and stopped her trembling. She held her ground, and Odysseus wondered how to approach this beautiful girl. Should he fall at her knees or keep his distance, and ask her with honeyed words to show him the way to the city and give him some clothes? He thought it over and decided it was better to keep his distance and not take the chance of offending the girl by touching her knees. So he started this soft and winning speech.
Okay, thank you. You can stop there. Now, it would seem to us common sense, right, that if you wash up naked and filthy on a beach, you probably shouldn't go run up and touch the first person you see, right? That's probably going to put them off a little bit. But why is this a consideration then for Odysseus? Does anybody understand what he means when he talks about falling before her feet and touching her knees? Does anybody get what that is? That actually has a very specific meaning to the Greeks. It's the gesture of the suppliant. Right? A suppliant, right, is someone who is asking someone else for help, right? So the official way of asking someone for help for the Greeks was to go up to that person, right, drop down to your knees and put your arms around their knees, right? And if it was a man, you touched his beard as well. What you're doing, what does that particular gesture indicate? Like, why would that gesture show that you need help? What are you doing?
You're kind of submitting to them in a way.
Yes.
You're groveling, really.
You know what? Yeah, you're putting yourself in the other person's power, right? You're showing them it's like, I am at your mercy. Ooh, hello. Right, I am at your mercy. Please deal justly with me, right? Please help me. And yet he decides not to do that. Why not? Okay, yeah. But, like, civilized people, at least according to the Greek standard, wouldn't bother about that, right? Wouldn't care. It's like, okay, doesn't matter that this guy's naked, he's asking for help, right? Clearly he is in a bad situation. The least I can do is give him some damn pants. Or a tunic. Pardon?
Pride.
Well, it's not pride. It's not pride that's the issue here. Remember, what's the question that he asks when he first wakes up?
He doesn't know where he is, so he's not sure if that gesture's...
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't know who these people are, if they're people, or if they're going to recognize this gesture, right? If they're people, they might not be civilized. He's certainly run into lots of people who weren't. And they might actually be evil spirits or monsters, right? So, probably best to keep your distance before agreeing to put yourself in their power. Right. I implore you, young lady, are you a goddess or mortal? If you are one of heaven's divinities, I think you are most like great Zeus's daughter Artemis. You have her looks, her stature, her form. If you are a mortal and live on this earth, thrice blessed is your father, your queenly mother, thrice blessed your brothers. Their hearts must always be warm with happiness when they look at you, just blossoming as you enter the dance. And happiest of all will be the lucky man who takes you home with a cartload of gifts. Now, why is it a smart move on his part to compare her specifically to the goddess Artemis? What are the attributes? Is anybody familiar with the goddess Artemis? Do you know what her attributes were?
Wasn't she really, 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 really beautiful? And kind of this.
Goddesses tended to be.
Yeah,
Goddess of the
of
hunt.
sorts. So
Yeah, she's the goddess of the hunt.
being a goddess in general, I mean,
Yeah. She's the goddess of the hunt.
yeah.
Protector of women.
She's a protector of women, yeah. General attitude of Artemis towards sexuality.
Negative.
Yeah, she is also a goddess of chastity. Right? The goddess of the hunt and an eternal virgin goddess. So, why is it smart for a creepy, dripping, naked man to immediately compare her to a virgin goddess of chastity?
Well, he doesn't know her, and he doesn't know anybody in this town, and he's naked and a random person. So
Yeah.
it's in those times, chastity was very, very valued. So saying that she's kind of the opposite of a slut was probably going to fly a little better than saying, oh hey, sexy
Of course. Right? What does it suggest about his intentions towards her?
It's like saying that he's like not gonna try to do that. Or
Yeah. He's like, say, the beautiful goddess you most remind me of is Artemis, who kills people who try to see her naked, right? Yes, so he's announcing that his own intentions are completely honorable and non-sexual, right? The goddess you remind me most of is the goddess of chastity, right? I'm going to keep my distance. I'm just going to stay back here, and we'll work this out over this gap, right? And how do she and her friends help him? What are they given? They give him clothes, yeah. Right? The big thing he is lacking at this moment. And what else do they give him?
Olive oil to wash with.
Yeah, they give him olive oil and they get, essentially, here, come on over here and take a bath, right? Now, where have we seen the clothes in a bath motif before?
Gilgamesh.
It happens like half a dozen times in Gilgamesh, right? And what does taking a bath and putting on new clothes usually indicate?
Entering a new phase.
Yeah, it's a change in state, right? You're not the same thing you were before. So he's no longer now Odysseus the homeless wanderer, right? He's back on the path to his homeland, right? He's washing off the salt and grime of the sea in order to begin his return journey home. Right, so that's what the new clothes in the bath indicate here, right? They also make him a lot more presentable, and he probably smells better. But if we look at the end of his speech to Nausicaa here, page 400, right? He's asked her for some clothes, right? And for yourself, may the gods grant you your heart's desire, a husband and a home, and the blessing of a harmonious life. For nothing is greater or finer than this. When a man and woman live together with one heart and mind, bringing joy to their friends and grief to their foes. Now, this is also not as innocent a statement as it may sound. This specifically has to do with Greek ideas of how a household was supposed to be ordered. Right, so the Greek word for household and hearth is, we'll just put it here with our other Greek words, oikos, O-I-K-O-S, right? You may recognize this as the brand of indigestible Greek yogurt that is favored by John Stamos, right? Probably the only Greek-American celebrity who was not busy at the time when they needed a spokesman. So good for you, John Stamos. I hope Fuller House does well. So yeah, oikos means household, but it means a specific type of household, right? A perfectly ordered Greek household has separate spheres for men and women. The public outward-facing parts of the house, the open portions of the house, are the male sphere. The man is supposed to be the public face of the family. The inner private portions of the house, where certain kinds of work are done, cooking, weaving, brewing, and where the children are quartered, that's supposed to be the woman's sphere of the house, right? So there's a division between, like a division of labor within the household, right? Men's portion is the public portion, women's portion is the private portion. And one of the tests that Odysseus uses when he lands in a new place to see if people are civilized is whether they follow this particular division of labor, this particular household pattern. Now, I want you especially, I want you to remember all of these Greek terms we're throwing out, but if you forget all of the others, right, remember oikos, because it is vitally important to understanding the Greek mindset, Greek culture. Right? The oikos, for the ancient Greeks, really is a kind of microcosm of society. It's the basic building block of society. And if the oikos is out of order, if the household is out of order, then society falls apart as well, right? Okay, everybody still with me? Everybody get that? All right, so let's sort of continue on as he journeys towards the city, right? So we see here Nausicaa's description of her father's country. If we look on page 402, can I get a volunteer to read from Get Ready Now, Stranger? All right, Lola, go for it.
Get ready now, stranger, to go to the city, so I can show you the way to my father's house, where I promise you will meet the best of your Phaeacians. Now this is what you must do, and I think you understand. As long as we're going through countryside and farms, keep up with my handmaidens behind the wagon. Just jog along with them. I'll lead the way, and we'll soon come to the city. It has a high wall around it and a harbor on each side. The isthmus gets narrow, and the upswept poles are drawn up to the road. Every citizen has his own private slip. The market's there too, surrounding Poseidon's beautiful temple and bounded by stones set deep in the earth. There, men are always busy with their ship's tackle, with cables and sails, and with planing their oars. Phaeacians don't care for quivers and bows, but for oars and masts and streamlined ships in which they love to cross the gray salt sea. It's their rude remarks I would rather avoid. There are some insolent louts in this town, and I can just hear one of them saying, "Well, who's this tall, handsome stranger trailing along behind Nausicaa? Where'd she pick him up? She'll probably marry him, some shipwreck she's taken in from parts unknown. He's sure not local. Maybe a god has come to answer her prayers, dropped out of the sky for her to have and to hold. It's just as well she's found herself a husband from somewhere else, since she turns up her nose at the many Phaeacians who woo her." That's what they'll say, and it will count against me. I myself would blame anyone who acted like this, a girl who, with her father and mother to tell her better, kept the company of men before her wedding day. No, stranger, be quick to understand me, so that you can win from my father and escort home, and soon at that. Close by the road you will find a grove of Athena, beautiful poplars surrounded by a meadow. A spring flows through it. Right there is my father's estate and vineyard, about as far from the city as a shout will carry. Sit down there and wait for a while until we reach the city and arrive at my house. When you think we've had enough time to get there, go into the city and ask any Phaeacian for the house of my father, Lord Alcinous. It's very easy to spot, and any child can lead you there. There's no other house in all Phaeacia built like the house of the hero Alcinous. Once you're safely within the courtyard, go quickly through the hall until you come to my mother. She'll be sitting by the hearth in the firelight, spinning sea blue yarn, a sight worth seeing. As she leans against a column, her maids behind her. Right beside her, my father sits on his throne, sipping his wine like an immortal god. Pass him by and throw your arms around my mother's knees if you want to see your homeland soon, however far it may be. If she smiles upon you, there is hope that you will return to your home and see your loved ones again.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So that was a long sort of chunk of text to get through, but there's a reason I wanted her to read through the whole thing, right? If we look at the various phases of the journey to her parents' hearth that she describes, right? All of these, to a Greek, would be markers of civilization, right? The first thing you're going to pass through is farms, right? That's the first thing you need to do if you want to build a city, is you have to have a stable food source. So you got to start farming. Then you will come to a city with a wall and a harbor, right? So clearly these people practice the crafts of shipbuilding and masonry, right? So they have advanced crafts among them. They have a market. They have a temple. They keep men and women separate in the same ways that the Greek oikos insists they be kept separate. They have vineyards. Wine is actually particularly important culturally. We'll see how people are supposed to behave with wine in a moment, and then when we look at the Cyclops episode next time, we'll see how people are not supposed to behave with wine. And when she tells Odysseus what to do to get her mother's help, right? Basically, what does she tell him to do? Yeah. Drop down and hug her knees, right? She clearly recognizes that gesture of the suppliant that we talked about a moment ago, right? So all of these together mark for Odysseus not just that these people are civilized, but that they're civilized in the same ways that he is, right? That these people are basically Greeks. All he has to go on so far is Nausicaa's word. He hasn't seen any of this yet, but this is particularly important given that every island that he's going to visit in his journey is lacking important aspects of this sort of picture of civilization, right? There will be places he'll go where they'll have some of these things but not others. So even places that are civilized in particular ways are going to be barbaric in others. And in fact, the word barbarian, just as a little side note, we all know what a barbarian is, right? What's a barbarian? If you call someone a barbarian, what are you saying about them?
Simple, kind of
Mm-hmm.
savage.
So yeah, uncivilized, right? Uncouth. Not fit to be among civilized people. The word barbarian actually comes from a Greek joke, right? It was God damn it. It was a way that the Greeks would describe the languages of people who didn't speak Greek. Right? They would just sort of mock non-Greek speakers by saying bar, like whatever they were saying was just gibberish. So hence our word barbarian. So the Greeks were actually pretty goddamn snooty about who counted as civilized and who didn't. All right, but at least we see that according to most of Odysseus's criteria, the Phaeacians appear to be civilized. And when he gets into their city and finds the marketplace, who helps him out from there?
Athena.
Yeah, this is where he meets the goddess Athena again, right, disguised as a girl. And she describes to him aspects of the place he is now in, right? Page 405, the gray-eyed one was the first to speak. Here you are, Granddad. The house you asked for. You will find the lords feasting at a banquet. Go inside and don't be afraid of anything. Things turn out better for a man who is bold, especially if he's a stranger from a distant land. The first person you'll meet is the queen Arete, is her name, and she's from the same line as King Alcinous. And she goes into their genealogy and all that, right? But the name Arete is particularly important. Even if the queen doesn't actually do all that much in the narrative, Arete is a Greek word that means right or proper. So Arete, the name Arete, means that this is someone who always follows correct procedure, correct behavior, right? Arete is right. Arete does things the right way. Now, let's see, what's the thing that I'm looking for? Right, if we look on page 407, Odysseus steps inside the hall of Alcinous and Arete. And can I get a volunteer to start reading from line 140? Odysseus stood and gazed. Anybody? Someone who has not yet read it.
Odysseus stood
Thank you,
and
sir.
gazed at all of the blessings the gods had lavished on the house of Alcinous. When he had taken it all in, he passed quickly over the threshold and entered the house. There he found the Phaeacian nobles tipping their cups in honor of Hermes, to whom they poured libations last of all. When they thought it was time to take their rest, Odysseus, the godlike survivor, went through the hall in the heavy mist Athena had wrapped him in, until he came to Arete and Lord Alcinous. There he threw his arms around Arete's knees, and the magical mist melted away at that moment. They were all hushed silence, marveling at the sight of Odysseus, who now made his prayer. Arete, daughter of godlike Rhexenor, to your husband and to your knees I come in great distress, and to these banqueters also. May the gods grant prosperity to them in this life, and may each of them hand down their wealth and honor to their children after them. Grant me but this, a speedy passage home, for I have suffered long far from my people. And with that, he sat down in the ashes by the fireside. The hall fell silent. Finally, Xenia,
Close enough.
a Phaeacian elder, wise in the old ways and in the ways of words, spoke out with goodwill among them. Alcinous, this will not do at all. It is not proper that a guest sit in the ashes on the hearth. We were all holding back, waiting on your word. Come, help the stranger up, and have him sit upon a silver-studded chair. And bid the heralds mix wine, so we may pour libations also to Zeus, Lord of thunder, who walks beside suppliants. And let the housekeeper bring out food for our guests.
Keep going.
When the sacred king Alcinous heard this, he took the hand of Odysseus, the cunning hero, and raised him from the fireside, and had him sit on a polished chair from which he asked his son Oedipus to rise. For he was Alcinous' best beloved son, and sat at his right hand. The maid poured water from a golden pitcher into a silver basin for him to wash his hands, and then set up a polished table nearby.
Okay, can I get somebody else to read a little bit from the top of 408? Give Coursera's voice a rest. It's just words printed on a page, guys. They won't bite. From another serving woman.
Another serving woman, grave and
Thank you.
dignified, set out bread and jewelry silver from the other dishes she had. So Odysseus, who had endured much, ate and drank. And the sacred king Athena spoke to the herald. Artemis meets the bowl and serve wine to all, so we may pour libations also to Zeus, Lord of thunder, who walks beside suppliants. Odysseus mixed the mellow wine and served it to all, pouring out first drops of libation which they all tipped out. When they had drunk to their heart's content, Odysseus addressed them and said,
Okay, that's you can stop there. Thank you. So does anybody know what's going on with the mixing of wine here? Why they're pouring wine into a bowl and mixing it? Okay. It's because Greek wine was basically a concentrate, right? You would get it as this kind of thick, kind of syrupy, like, have you ever made like orange juice or Kool-Aid or something like that, like from a concentrate? Yeah, you don't drink the concentrate, right? Unless you want to give yourself diabetes, which don't do that, right? It's not a good idea. But yeah, Greek wine sort of came the same way. It's like this thick syrup with a very, very, very high alcohol content that you would pour into a mixing bowl, and then you would add water to make it drinkable, right? This is sort of part of a social ritual. So wine for the Greeks has to be mixed. Now the reason I point this out is because this is going to be very, very important when we look at the Cyclops episode, right? We see the Phaeacians mixing wine, which shows they're civilized, they know what to do with it. Not only that, they also pour out libations. Does everybody get what they mean by pouring out libations? What they're doing is they're taking the glass of wine and they're, pouring a couple of drops on the ground. This is a simple example. Yeah, exactly, yeah. This is a simple example of what is sometimes called a Cathodic Sacrifice. Chthonic. Now, we talked a little bit, I think, previously about how, about the logic of ancient world religious practices, right? Where if you wanted to talk to the gods in the sky, you went up onto a mountain and built an altar there, and you would, say, sacrifice an animal that you intended to eat. You'd roast it on that altar. You'd basically essentially like an altar was really kind of like a barbecue. And the smoke would go up to the gods, and they would enjoy that part, and you would eat the meat, right? So you want to talk to the gods in the sky, you send smoke up to them, right? If you wanted to talk to the gods in the ground, you approached it using the same kind of logic, right? You would either pour wine onto the ground for them, you would bury things for them, or in some cases, we'll see Odysseus make a chthonic sacrifice when he wants to speak with the spirits of the dead in Hades. Right? In order to do that, he has to kill a sheep in a certain way, like in a pit, right, where the spirits of the earth can come and get at the blood, right? So pouring out libations is it's a very simple kind of chthonic sacrifice, right? Again, I point this out not because it's so important in this scene, but because it will be important later, right? In fact, much of what we see in Odysseus' interaction with the Phaeacians, we'll be able to find some kind of counterpoint to it in his journey through the various islands. Okay. And what about just sort of generally the way he's treated when he comes into this court? What do they do for him? Do they just give him a plate and say, here, go sit in the corner?
Nah, they give him a silver chair or something like that. They offer Athena. And then that's what they offer him Athena.
Yeah, I mean, they don't just help him, right? They give him the second best seat in the house. They give him a feast, right? And they get him liquored up. Right, so they don't just show a minimum of hospitality to the guest, right? They genuinely try to take care of him. They show him honor. Right? They show him a great deal of respect, even though they don't know who he is yet. Right? Hear me, Phaeacian lords and counselors, so I may speak to you what is in my heart. Now that you have feasted, go home to your rest. In the morning we will invite more of the elders and entertain the stranger in our halls and offer fine sacrifices to the gods. Then we will think of how to convey our guest to his own native land, so he may come speedily and with joy, be it ever so far. Nor shall he suffer any harm or misfortune before he sets foot upon his own land. Thereafter he shall suffer whatever fate the spinners spun for him when he was born. But if he is one of the immortals come down from heaven, then the gods have changed their ways. Always before this, whenever we offered sacrifice to them, they appeared to us in their own bright forms, and they sat with us and shared the feast. Even when one of us meets them on the road, they do not conceal themselves, for we are kin, just like the Cyclops and savage giants. So, the Phaeacians are kin to both gods and to monsters. But the important thing here in this passage is the reference to the spinners. Does anybody know what he's talking about here when he says the spinners? Yeah, the three fates, right? So these are three goddesses. Clotho, who weaves the thread of your life when you're born. Lachesis, who measures it out, right, decides how long it's going to be. And Atropos, who cuts it at the end. Greek culture was fatalistic, right? The length of your life and certain major life events, certain major things that would happen to you, were regarded as already predetermined when you were born. How many of you are familiar with the Oedipus Myth? Anybody know the Oedipus Myth at all? Yeah, a couple of you. Okay, so what do you know about the Oedipus story?
He kills his father and has sex with his mom.
Okay, yeah, you okay, right. So, okay, you know the disgusting parts. Okay, all right, that's sort of as I expected. All right, so essentially the way the myth works, right, is that the king of Thebes, the Greek city of Thebes, a guy by the name of Laius, goes to an oracle, right, these women who were dedicated to a particular god and would drop a lot of magic mushrooms and give you cryptic prophecies about the future, right? So he goes to visit this oracle. Yes, dropping magic mushrooms, by the way, was a big thing in the ancient world. I know that this is a bit of a pattern. So Laius goes to the oracle, and the oracle tells him that the son that he has just brought into the world is destined to kill his father and marry his mother. So, the king is, oh, hell no, and decides, well, we're going to have to get rid of this baby. Now, it would have been wrong, it would have been considered a sin to simply kill the child. So the way the Greeks typically dealt with unwanted children was to leave them out in the wilderness, and then if they were fated to survive, they would. If they were not fated to survive, well, it wasn't my fault, right? It's fate. Now, to make doubly sure that fate works out the way it's supposed to with this kid, his parents pierce his ankles and run a leather thong through them so that he can't crawl away. He is found by a kindly shepherd who takes him and gives him to the childless king of the neighboring city of Corinth, who raises him then as his own son. Oedipus is an adult. The name Oedipus actually means swollen foot from the condition he was in when he was found. As an adult, he goes to the same oracle who gives him the same prophecy that his biological father was given, right? You are destined to murder your father and marry your mother. He doesn't know who his mother and father are. He thinks his parents are the king and queen of Corinth. So he says, oh, well, I can never go home again. On the road, he meets a nasty and unpleasant old man who demands that the traveler get out of his way. Oedipus refuses. They fight. He kills the old man. Goes to the city of Thebes, defeats a monster who has been plaguing the city, marries the queen as his reward, fathers 4 children with her, and only some years afterwards learns his true identity and what he has done, right? So this is kind of like, the reason I go into this lengthy explanation of this that has relatively little to do with the plot of the Odyssey is that this is sort of how the Greek idea of fate worked, right? The means by which you reached your fate were not predetermined, but the fate itself was, right? So if Odysseus is predetermined to make it home, there's nothing that can stop it. But if he offends a god along the way, as he does, then they can make sure that he gets home late and broken and miserable, right? The means by which he gets home can be changed, right? Just as Oedipus and his parents tried very hard to avoid their fates, right? In the end, despite all their machinations, the same thing that was supposed to happen ended up happening, right? The thing that is supposed to happen to you will end up happening to you, regardless of how you may try to avoid it, right? Okay, everybody clear? All right, good. So let's look here. Briefly, okay, so Odysseus participates in the Phaeacian sports. He shows his prowess, right? The one guy insults him. And then they sit down to eat. But he still hasn't told anyone who he is, right? Can we look on page 416 for a minute? After Odysseus cheered up at this, glad to see a loyal supporter out in the field, in a lighter mood now, he spoke to the Phaeacians. Can I get somebody to read Odysseus' words from here now? Anybody, just go ahead and start reading. For match that if you can, boys.
Match that if you can. Boys.
Thank you, Bradley.
In a minute, I'll get another one out just as far or farther. And if anyone else has the urge to try me, step right up. I'm angry now. I do not care if it's boxing, wrestling, or even running. Come on. Or come one, come all. Except Laodamas.
Laodamus.
Okay. Who is my host? Only a fool would challenge the man who gives him hospitality in a distant land. He would only wind up hurting himself, but I wouldn't turn down anyone else or take any of you lightly. I only want to see what you're made of and to test myself. I'm not weak in any athletic event, and I really know how to handle a bow. I'm always the first to hit my man in the enemy lines, no matter how many archers are standing with me and getting off shots. Only
Philoctetes.
Philoctetes and all the Greeks outshot me at Troy. No one else came close, nor could any man now alive on this earth. I could not compare myself to the men at Mole, or Hercules, or
That's okay. We can actually stop there anyway,
Okay.
right? We've already sort of hit the point I wanted you to see here, right? So he still hasn't said who he is, right? He still hasn't named himself to the Phaeacians. But after his little success in the athletic contest here, what's he doing by saying things like, only Philoctetes outshot me at Troy?
bits and pieces.
Pardon?
Bits and pieces of.
Yeah, he's hinting at who he is, right? He's offering little bits and pieces of information that if they're smart and paying attention, they can put it together. At the very least, they can say, okay, this is a guy who fought at Troy. Right? The way that he reveals his identity to these people is really sort of pretty calculated and canny. Right now, we see him, crying, but who was it that asked Demodocus, the poet, for a song about Troy in the first place? Odysseus asks Demodocus, right, to play a song about the destruction of Troy, right? Which conveniently gives him a chance to display emotion, which conveniently gives him a chance to reveal to the Phaeacians who he really is, right? Yes, I am that Odysseus who led the soldiers and the horse, right? But it's the other thing. Okay, two more things I want to note about this, and then I'll give you the reading questions for today and let you go. Does anybody understand what's going on when it keeps saying that the poet is moved by the god?
Receiving inspiration from the muses.
Yeah, he's receiving divine inspiration from the muses. Now, the way Greeks believed artistic inspiration worked was that you were literally possessed by a muse when you composed or performed, right? That a muse actually came and took possession of your body, right? It wasn't you doing it. It was the gods working through you. So when they say moved by the god, they're referring to that belief that all artistic inspiration is divine, right? It's the gods acting through a human vessel. The other thing that we should note about this, right, if we look at the content of the song here, right? So he spoke, and the bard, moved by the god, began to sing. He made them see it happen, how the Greeks set fire to their huts on the beach and were sailing away, while Odysseus and the picked men with him sat in the horse, which the Trojans had dragged into their city. There the horse stood, and the Trojans sat around it, and could not decide what they should do. There were three ways of thinking: hack open the timbers with pitiless bronze, or throw it from the heights of the rocks below, or let it stand as an offering to appease the gods. The last was what would happen, for it was fated that the city would perish, once it enclosed the great wooden horse, in which now sat the Greek heroes who would spill Troy's blood. The song went on. The Greeks poured out of their hollow ambush and sacked the city. He sang how one hero here and another there ravaged tall Troy, but how Odysseus went with the war god himself, with Menelaus, to the house of Deiphobus, and there, he said, Odysseus fought his most daring battle and won with the help of Pallas Athena. This was his song, and Odysseus wept. Tears welled up in his eyes and flowed down his cheeks. A woman wails as she throws herself upon her husband's body. He has fallen in battle before the town walls, fighting to the last to defend his city and protect his children. As she sees him dying and gasping for breath, she clings to him and shrieks, while behind her soldiers prod their spears into her shoulders and back. And as they led her away into slavery, her tear-drenched face is a mask of pain. So what are we being reminded of here about our hero? What are we being reminded of about Odysseus here? Is Odysseus just a clever trickster hero? What kind of person is he really?
He's just a man, too.
He's just a man, right? That's, one thing to remember about Odysseus is that he is a fully human hero, right? He's not a demigod like Gilgamesh. He's fully human. But what's he been responsible for? Yeah, basically for a genocide, right? This is a guy who helped to wipe out a whole city. Right? Odysseus isn't just some guy who wants to get home to his wife, right? He is a destroyer. Right? He's called at some points here ravager of cities. And we'll see at various points that Odysseus is not a particularly nice guy. And definitely not a particularly honest guy. So one thing that I really want you to pay attention to as you read the next 3 books, right? Think about Odysseus' reputation. And think also about whether or not elements of the story he tells could actually be corroborated by anyone else. Right? So let me give you the reading questions for next time. This is all I have for you. Does anybody have any questions about anything? Okay. Well, and just remember too, right? Response paper 2 must be completed by this Friday at midnight, right? Okay, so let me give you the reading questions. And then we're good to go. See you Wednesday.